Hello and welcome to the Healing Insight Podcast, episode 59, with me, Sarah Hunt.
And me, Jez Hunt.
Hello and welcome, everyone. We're here again, and there is a beautiful, windy day down here in Bedford. A good washing, drying day, as they say. Um, and they did promise us a bit of a mini heat wave, apparently, but it's not feeling like that to me. How's it up in Leicestershire, Joe?
We have the mini heat wave. There's not so much wind, lots of sun, and it's very warm. And if I go outside, I'm taking my jumper off. So it's almost getting to shorts weather.
Uh-oh. Listeners, Jay spends 3/4 of the year in shorts. I don't know how, but anyway, I like to be warm and not cold. So I tend to layer up, but there we go. Today, I thought it'd be interesting to explore self-belief,
Mm-hmm.
um, as it's something that a lot of people struggle with, I think. So it's kind of would be good to have a little look at that, see where it possibly comes from, what we can do to have more belief in ourselves and our abilities and what we can achieve
Yeah,
and what we're here to achieve.
absolutely. I'll just make an apology at the beginning of this. If my voice is a little bit croaky, I'm just getting over a cold that I had last week. So I might be a little bit croaky. Just
No
so you know.
problem.
It's not going to stop me doing it, but
That's good. That's good. Okay. So, self-belief. Do you feel that where people lack self-belief, it possibly stems from things happening in childhood?
can do.
Although it could be something that's happened that's just completely knocked their confidence and then affects their ability to believe in themselves and what they're capable of.
Yeah, it
Um,
could be. Where would I go with this? I feel that. So, in the true sense of the thing of knocking confidence, then yeah, that could happen at any time. So it could be something that happened yesterday, could knock my confidence in myself. I would possibly go with what you said at the beginning, in that there is likely to be, although that might be the trigger, there is likely to be a root, perhaps a bit deeper than that's triggered within the person, that may well have occurred in 0 to 7 or 7 to 14 years old. So in those sort of early years, it's
mm,
likely that there would be a connection at some level. So the reason I hesitated initially is because it doesn't necessarily all stem down to childhood stuff, although that is where a lot of the programming and a lot of the beliefs that we take on about ourselves are formed, because we take our beliefs on from our parents. For example, in the first instance, it's quite often from
mm,
what our parents believe. So if a parent turns around and says, don't do that, you'll fall off and hurt yourself, that could, say with a bike or whatever, then, or standing on a chair even, then that can set up all sorts of beliefs in oneself. It depends how that child in that moment interprets that statement and how they
mm,
internalize it. So the reason I hesitated was, yes, I think on the whole, from my experience with clients and myself for that matter, then the majority of what we end up working with is childhood based, or could be childhood based. However, there are things that have happened maybe in the last 5, 10 years of someone's life that has had a significant impact. So, for example, a client who was in a narcissistic relationship, finally got out, then that triggered stuff in that person. They were struggling with that. Doesn't mean that there was a link with childhood trauma or childhood issues of why they attracted that narcissistic relationship to them, but it was linked to stuff about not good enough. So it wasn't that they had any, no one had displayed any narcissistic behavior to them previously, no one had bullied them, no one had, but there was an element of not good enough that was formed in childhood that this narcissistic relationship played into, and that's how they internalized it of not good enough. They linked it back to that, even though,
But doesn't a lack of self-belief come back to not feeling good enough? If you don't feel good enough, you don't tend to believe that you can achieve things, whatever it is that you want to achieve.
yes and okay. So I know high achievers I've worked with who they're pushing themselves to the extreme. They're struggling because they don't know. So they don't believe in themselves, but they do believe failure isn't an option. So they keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, but they're coming up against a brick wall all the time. That's not necessarily not believing in themselves, because they wouldn't have achieved what they'd achieved if they hadn't have done it. So there is
Mm.
proof there. So there is a belief in themselves, but their belief is that failure is not an option. So, but they're not pushing themselves forward in the right way. So, if someone's over motivated, then they can, or pushing themselves to the extreme. So I'm thinking of me when I was back in corporate. I mean, I was doing sometimes a day, I did 20-hour days for like weeks on end. Wasn't healthy for a relationship, for my health, for family life or whatever. But I was so driven because, in my case, because I was proving to everyone that had doubted me from the age of 5 onwards that actually I am good enough, I can do this. But that drove me in the wrong way, because it was an extreme reaction to a belief I held about myself, where people are telling me I'm not good enough, but actually I am, actually I can do this, and look at how well I'm doing. But it was that constant drive to be better and to better myself.
Yeah, but don't you think you can have the two extremes? That you can have that extreme of somebody becoming really driven to prove that they are good enough, and you can have the other extreme where the person has so little belief in themselves that they're not motivated to do anything, and then they create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I agree with that. And there are different levels of how things affect people anyway. So someone with, and this is why using terms like self-doubt, I think are a bit too broad, in that someone struggling with self-doubt to the point of not putting their feet outside the front of the house because of whatever they're scared of or whatever the doubt's causing in them, versus someone who just won't make a decision on what flavour ice cream they want. They can be to do with their own self doubt, but at majorly different extremes. So
Different,
yes,
absolutely. And I, if I think back to my corporate experiences, um, I remember, and there's one company in particular that I can think of, one job in particular, where I struggled to start with until I fully understood what I was doing. And my boss said to me, "You're really good until we push you out of your comfort zone, and then it takes you then you kind of struggle until you understand what you're doing, and then you get your confidence back." So it's there's different levels of things, isn't there? So I would go through periods of being having a lot of self belief, being really confident with what I was doing, and then something new would be introduced to me, and I'd go, "Oh,
that's
I'm not
that.
sure if I can do this. I'm not sure if I understand this." And then I created situations. I can think of one or two situations where things backfired on me. In the clinical situation where I was teaching people to use equipment and what have you, because I haven't I've fully understood things. I felt I didn't have enough self-belief and enough self-confidence, and so I didn't do things quite correctly, and it all went a bit pear-shaped, which then knocked my self-confidence a bit more and my ability to believe in myself until I'd kind of got it straightened out by doing some extra training to and then having somebody with me to just um oversee what I was doing so that until I got my confidence back with what I was doing, and therefore then got my self belief back. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
So it's kind of, I think there's lots of different situations where self belief can be lacking, and it may be for a short period of time, or it may be something that's been going on for a long period of time. And like you say, it can be at different extremes and different levels depending on where you're at and what you're doing.
yeah, and that's actually the learning cycle anyway. You talk about, you know, when you're pushed out your comfort zone, and we can lack belief in ourselves, but that's part of the learning cycle, the way we learn. So we learn something, we're comfortable with something, we have that level of knowledge we want, but if we want to grow, we have to learn something new. So we have to push ourselves through our out of our comfort zone into learning zone, or in to take on something new. So there is, I would suggest, there is an unsettled period for most people anyway. Probably
Mm.
everybody. It's just that whether it shows up. So someone who's really confident about learning new stuff doesn't mean they're going to internalize it and be able to use it confidently, even though they've gone through the learning process confidently.
Yeah,
So it can show up at different points anyway. So I think I I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that in terms of all of the clients I've worked with, so if any of you are listening in the past, they've all had self doubt or self confidence issues of some kind at some point that have shown up in, or have been the root of the things that showed up that I've worked with. So
mm.
I would suggest that all of us, every single person on the planet, has had some self doubt or self confident issue, or has some self doubt or self confidence issue anyway. I think it's quite common.
Yeah, it's common.
You look at teenage girls makeup when they go through that whole phase of, you know, it's all body confidence, which doesn't help when you've got the fashion industry showing stick type women, and that's what you need to aspire to. Well, that brings up a lot of self-doubt and self-shame and body confidence issues in itself.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So a lot of it's not just, is it? It's not just what goes on in childhood, but it's the outside influences as well that go on um, from the media, from social media, from other people around you, and it's the type of support that people get as well. And that doesn't mean that people need to be completely nursemaided, but actually feeling that they are supported, feeling that if they've got a question, say they're lacking self-belief at work, they're not fully understanding something, but feeling that they can go and ask the questions, they can get the additional information that they need to be able to build their confidence without feeling silly. Because if you feel that you shouldn't be asking the question or that you'll look silly or whatever, then that kind of just has that spiral effect of knocking you again, doesn't it? Or you knocking yourself because um you're making the assumption that you're stupid because you can't do this. And that's probably and possibly a lot of the issues that we experience is down to that little voice on the shoulder that's that's knocking us when we don't need to be knocking ourselves. We need to be looking at the positives, what we have achieved. And also, and one of the things that I've been reminded of recently is to look back at where we were to where we are now.
yeah,
And that, you know, and I look back at some things. a year ago to where I was a year ago to where I am now. There's a huge change. But when you're in the minute by minute, day by day situation, you can't always see just how far you've come and how you've developed your self-confidence and how you've developed your self-belief in your and then actually you're in a much stronger, better place now than you were 6 months ago, than you were 2 years ago, than you were 10
Yeah,
years ago.
yeah.
And it comes back to reminding yourself to look back, see where you were, where you are now, and see and look at the journey. Just observe the journey, not analyze it. Just observe it and see that actually, even if you haven't realized it, you've moved a long way and developed and grown um, in a big way over probably quite a short period of time, a relatively short period of time. But it's very easy to kind of be stuck in where you're at now, and because things don't feel like they're going as well as you would like them to be going, you can then find yourself, um, yeah, I know, I'm very good at this one. Probably why it's come up. But yeah, that you actually are where you're meant to be. And again, we're laughing about this because this has been really highlighted to me where I've had expectations of where I think I should be, versus where I'm at. And actually, I don't need to be where I'm trying to think I should be. I need to be where I'm at, if that makes sense. And so I've actually gone through a period of putting too much pressure on myself because I think I should be further ahead with what I'm doing than I actually am. And I've been reminded on a few occasions recently that actually, no, I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm developing exactly as I need to be. I'm progressing exactly as I need to be, and everything's okay. And that is quite a thing to take on board and shift when you've been in a position where you've put a lot of pressure on yourself and your expectation is much higher than it actually needs to be. It takes a bit of acceptance and a bit of understanding of yourself and a bit of, oh, actually, it's okay. It's okay for it to be as it is. Because actually, when I look back to where I am now, I can see there is a huge change and a huge shift. Um, and I developed far more than I realised I have. But it's just reminding myself to look back where I was a year ago, where I am now, big difference. And yeah, so personal experience, um, and self doubt has been a problem, but probably because I've put that pressure on myself. Um, and you said about proving to other people, and I think it's not just proving to other people. I think I went through a period when I was certainly when I was younger and in corporate where I felt I needed to prove to myself
Yeah, yeah,
that I
absolutely.
could do really well, that I could be a single mother and do a demanding job. Um, until I came to a period where it just kind of, well, it was after I had my car accident, but it kind of woke me up, and I kind of realised that actually I didn't need to prove myself to myself anymore, and that I needed to look at what was important to me in life. Was it a demanding corporate job where I was being pushed all the time to achieve, and be a high achiever, or was it something that I could do that I really loved, that I could work around my family, and give them more time? So, things happen for a reason as well, and it's sometimes it's to make us actually stop and look and realise that actually none of that's actually relevant. It's what makes us happy that's really important. And if we're happy, then we start to have more self-belief, more self-confidence. If we're doing what we love, we'll build our confidence back up because we're doing what we love.
Yeah,
Whereas if we're doing something that we're not comfortable with, that takes us out of our comfort zone, then that can affect us because it's not pressing the right buttons, if you like, to keep us in that happy space.
yeah, absolutely. Just to pick up on a couple of things that you've said, if we compare ourselves, like you were saying, look back to see how far you've come. If we compare ourselves today with us 3 months ago, years ago, whatever, then we are more confident in ourselves because we will be making better decisions than we did then. We're making better decisions because of the experiences we've had and the lessons we've learned, or the knowledge we've attained that we can now apply to making decisions going forward. So we are naturally improving our self-confidence if we see it that we are naturally improving our self-confidence, because
Mm,
that's what these lessons are. If something doesn't work right, if I click ABC and I don't get D, then I should have learnt something that ABC is not going to give me D in that instance. So there is a learning, which means then I can have confidence that ABC doesn't equal D, but CAB does. If you see what I mean? So it's those learnings that actually help generate the confidence. It's the underlying thing that's the problem, which, so it's the belief that we hold. Going on to the other point I wanted to pick up on, where I said originally, we're trying to prove ourselves to other people. Actually, that boils down to we're trying to prove ourselves to ourselves, because
mm,
the only reason we're projecting it onto other people and we're proving it to other people is because we don't trust and believe in ourselves. And
mm,
rather than face the fact that we're the one that needs to change and we're the one that needs to the work doing, we project it onto other people. I'm proving it to him. No, you're proving it to yourself because of how
mm.
you feel about yourself. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Just come back to that, doesn't it?
so it's, it's completely understandable that people drive themselves in the way that they do, and driving yourself, whether it's driving yourself or not driving yourself, the link is actually, although they're opposite ends of the spectrum, the link itself is actually just not believing in yourself, or some self-doubt, or some issue with your belief in yourself to go through that. Or it could be a fear of failing. So if I do that and I fail, it's the belief about what's going to happen versus what actually will happen.
Yeah,
But what we believe will happen, or the fear of what might happen, stops us actually taking the action that we need to push us through that, because it takes us out of our comfort zone. And when we go out of our comfort zone, we feel vulnerable. We feel, it's a scary place to be. Well, yes and no. It's only there. It's taking us out of our comfort zone because we're learning something new. And as we grow, our comfort zone expands, contracts, but it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger over time. Or if you like, more stuff becomes comfortable because we've
mm,
experienced it. So the first time I got on a bike, or any of us got on a bike, that was not something within our comfort zone, that first ever time. And yet, if you've learnt to ride a bike, getting on a bike now should be well within people's comfort zones, because it's something that you went through that learning phase with.
or if it's not in your comfort zone because you haven't been on a bike for 20 years and then go out on one, it soon will be, because you kind
Yeah.
of get you remember that knowledge, don't you? And so you get yourself back into that place of confidence with it.
So yeah, absolutely. And I think the key to it, in my experience, in my life, the key to it for me in terms of my self-confidence and just trusting in my judgment the majority of the time, because I'm not perfect, was getting to that point in my life where it doesn't matter what other people think about me. I'm not bothered. I'm just at that stage where if people like me, great. If people don't like me, great. Go and find whoever you do like. I'm not worried about what people think of me anymore. It just doesn't matter, because it's out of my control. It's their issues that they're projecting onto me about how they feel about me. It's not anything I've got control over anyway. And it's not relevant to me. It's not going to affect my life. It's not going to stop me sleeping. Might have done years ago, but I had reached that point about probably 3 or 4 years ago, where it just doesn't matter. If that's what you want to do, you go do it. But it's not going
But
to
that's
bother me.
because, is that not because you have more self-belief and more self-confidence in yourself? So you're happy with who you are and where you're at,
Yes, and this is
and therefore it doesn't matter um the response that you get from. other people. Well, it does, and it doesn't in that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it
How do I
does.
want to put it? And it's at that point of not upsetting you.
It's yes, and sorry, that's what I was alluding to, and possibly didn't explain. But yes, the ideal or the ultimate way forward about self belief is to get to that point where you believe in yourself to the extent that, and this isn't ego, this is just believing in yourself to the extent that what happens outside of you doesn't actually matter. Yes, it's nice to get someone saying, oh, really good, whatever, and get some external validation and get some praise and have some contact with other people. But at the end of the day, I can have someone say something to me, which, depending on how I react or respond to it, or react, let's go with reaction because it's typically first the initial thing. So whether does it trigger me? If it does, then all that means is thank you very much. I appreciate that because now I've got something I can go and look at to heal within me that was triggered. Or it'll be something where, it's kind of that, well, Jez, that article you put out or that thing you said, I don't agree with it. Or something's not right with that. It doesn't resonate with me. Then those sorts of things, then I take that on board. I don't get, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't make me go, oh God, that means what I'm putting out there is rubbish and no, it just means that one person has a different opinion to me. They've
And
chosen
that's okay.
they've chosen to express that to me. So what that does is then just, okay, let me just reflect on their viewpoint. Does that change anything? Do I feel what they're saying is truth, more truth than mine is to me currently? So what I mean by that is I learn, I change my viewpoint. If I look back at what I believed 6 months ago, or certainly 3, 4, 5 years ago, I've had dramatic shifts. And I've done that by looking at other people's perspective and taking that on board in terms of just looking at it, sitting with it, maybe meditating on it, whatever. And how does this feel to me? Does this shift my perspective? Has this given me an aha moment? Or is it just, well, okay, that's their perspective. No, it doesn't resonate with me, so I'll just let it go. So that's part of my growth. So I'm going through the comfort zone growth, but without getting nervous or agitated about it anymore.
Mm.
I'm not. So, if someone said, right, I want you to learn to parachute and jump out of a plane, I can guarantee I would feel quite nervous about that. Doesn't mean I wouldn't do it. Doesn't mean I would do it. But I can, even just thinking about it, I can feel that, oh, yeah, not so sure about that one, so comfortable. But that to me is normal. It's not about self-doubt in this case. It's just, I've never done it before. But if I think about it, lots of, thousands of millions of jumps have been done and all successfully and very few problems statistically. So it's quite a safe thing to do if you go with the right people with the experience and, you go the right routes to do it. So it's not about self-belief in something like that. But then, of course, see, this is something else interesting about self-belief is then it's context-based anyway. Because if
Mm.
you're comfortable with one area of your life, then your belief in yourself in that area will be awesome. But if you're so it could be a mother, a parent of children could be comfortable being a parent, but could struggle in a relationship with the partner.
Mm.
Or other way around, they could be comfortable in a relationship with a partner, but struggle being a parent because they feel out of their comfort zone of, well, I don't know how to be a parent. I don't know what to do. That puts lots of people out of their comfort zone. Well, in a lot of cases, it is a learn as you go. That's life.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we will come across things we're not comfortable with. And whether that's actually self-doubt or just part of getting to that understanding in your life that things just happen and we have outcomes. And sometimes the outcomes are what we want them to be, and sometimes the outcomes aren't. It doesn't make it good or bad. That's just what it is.
Mm.
And when we get over the fear of getting an outcome we don't want, or the one we didn't intend, and realize that if we get an outcome that we don't want, use that in the air quotes, but then all that means is that we've learnt something. So the worst case of any situation is a learning. In fact,
And that's positive because if we don't learn, we don't grow.
yeah, absolutely. And actually, if you think about it, then the outcome of it, or the outcome of anything, is a learning. You either learn something. Oh, if I do that, I get what I want, or by doing these things, I got what I wanted, or the outcome I wanted, or by doing these things, I didn't get the outcome I wanted. It's all a learning.
Mm.
So there is no real downside. If we look at it as the bigger picture, there is no downside. It's all learning and stuff that we can take forward to make better decisions in the future. It can be possibly linked to self-doubt, but it can be the fear of the unknown, the fear of what if this happens, that is actually the problem, when the outcome isn't what we want it to be, what we desire it to be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Um,
so when it comes to decision making, for example, just about outcomes, and again, this kind of gets around the belief issue. I did an exercise with, and this wasn't my exercise. I got it off someone else who got it off someone else who got it off someone else. One of the trainings I did years ago. But if we flip a coin, so if we're trying to make a decision, you know, the whole flip a coin thing, heads or tails. Okay. For the majority of people, and I've done this again and again and again, they'll make a decision. So I don't know, let's use something really inane. Vanilla ice cream or strawberry ice cream. Heads for vanilla, tails for strawberry. Okay. So they'll say, right, they've made that decision. So vanilla's heads, tails is strawberry. The moment that coin gets flipped and goes up in the air, they make a decision about which one they actually want. Because if it comes down, so it'll be like, oh, I hope it's tails. So they've already made the decision that they want strawberry. But if it comes down heads, they get disappointed. Oh, well, okay, it came down as heads. And quite often it can be, well, let's do best out of three. Because it didn't come out as strawberry. But until they
because it
actually,
wasn't the outcome that they decided they wanted.
yeah, but they couldn't make or didn't make that conscious decision of outcome until the coin was in the air. Otherwise, they'd have just said, oh, I'll have strawberry. And that would have been it. They wouldn't have needed to flip a coin in the first place. So we actually know what we want, but we doubt ourselves. We doubt what we want, and possibly because of choice. This is something we've not thought about. I've not thought about for a while, but possibly because life is so full of choices. You're going to, I don't know, Starbucks or a Costa or a coffee shop, and you've got 58 different versions of coffee, because you can have your different milks and your different flavorings and your different types of coffee beans and different sizes and different. You've got so much choice. Is it any wonder that people struggle to make choices anymore? Whereas if you say you can have ice cream, you can have strawberry or vanilla, then you've got two choices, but it's still ice cream. I mean, you've got three choices because you could say, actually, no, thank you. But I think a lot of self-doubt is actually reinforced by things like that, where we have so many different decisions to make that we doubt ourselves. You know, if you went into a coffee shop and they said coffee with milk, without milk, and yeah, okay, if you've got an allergy, you can have a soy milk or whatever variant. But if it was a very simple thing, then people wouldn't struggle with it. And as long as they knew that that's what they were going into, they didn't have all these choices. You know, think, Sherelta and I were talking about this the other day, last week. We were talking about, we hadn't had an Indian or a Chinese for ages. And we don't have them very often anyway, but it was like, the in joke between us was, yeah, we'll get the menu, we'll look through the menu, and then we'll order what we had last time. Because we get into that comfortable, well, I really enjoy that. And actually, what if I have something else and it's not as nice? So we can be presented all these choices, but we go down the route of within our comfort zone of that because maybe our confidence isn't in ourselves to make a different decision. We default to the easiest option, and the easiest option is typically either doing nothing or something within our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I would suggest self-doubt related.
It's interesting, isn't it? Interesting how we default to certain behaviours or certain choices um, to keep us within our comfort zone. It's like, and I'm not saying it's everybody, but I know at times I've struggled with stepping outside of my comfort zone, as I've already said. It can be very uncomfortable, especially if you've got self-doubt or lack of confidence in yourself, lack of self-belief. It can be very uncomfortable place to be. But then if you can push yourself through that, um, there's a lot that you can learn and a lot that will help you to develop to be able to feel more comfortable for stepping outside of your comfort zone at a later date.
Yeah.
But it's building up that confidence to know that nothing bad's going to happen most of the time. Um, but there is going to be some big learning opportunities.
Yeah, I think to go back to that point of why we default, to me, it's kind of like our comfort zone is like an elastic band, and it starts off at whatever size it is from when we're born. And imagine just stretching it out into a circle. You're just stretching it out and holding it. And every time we learn something new, we stretch it a little bit more. And every time we learn something new and we go out of our comfort zone, we stretch it that little bit more. But we're stretching it all the time. And it's us getting comfortable with holding it at that level. But the moment we
Mm,
become uncomfortable and you let go of that elastic band, it reverts back to its original size. And that its original size is whatever we're absolutely at our core comfortable with. And quite often it's doing nothing. Because if we don't do anything, we're not taking any risks. So therefore there is no downside to that. It's kind of the what the feeling behind it, or the thinking behind it is, well, if I don't do anything, then it can't go wrong. So I can't, so a bad outcome won't happen. When
mm,
actually it's the wrong way to think, because you could stretch it, you could stretch your elastic band, stretch your comfort zone, do something, and you could actually end up with an outcome that you'd never dreamed of, that is just an amazing outcome for you. And you're
yeah.
right. In the majority of cases, there is very little that can happen to us that is actually that bad.
Mm.
Really. It's what we perceive it's going to be. It's our fear
It
over
does
the.
come back to our perception, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Our own perception and our previous experiences that then affect our perception.
I mean, I
But
know.
we can change our perception by being willing to take that step forward and move through things
Yeah.
and get the learning.
I mean, I know people who've lost the plot and been devastated when they've been turned down for a loan, for example. Well, just because you were turned down for a loan, it's not the end of the world. There are other options.
Mm,
And actually, the learning is that either that approach to that company or that approach isn't right for you as an outcome. It's our perception of things. If you've got a perception of, okay, that didn't work, let's try something else, then you're more likely to take the action that's going to move you through it than, oh, that didn't work. Oh my God, my life's ended.
yeah,
And that can come down to, well, will come down to self-belief, esteem, whatever issues with how we feel about us.
mm. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the most important thing that we can do is love ourselves and be compassionate with ourselves and accept that we are where we are and it's okay because it's right where we need to be right at this moment, this now moment.
Yeah.
This is where we need to be. And that's been a big lesson for me recently that I'm exactly where I need to be. and it's okay
Yeah,
just to be where I am now in this moment.
exactly. Not everything will work out how we expect it to. Not for anybody.
No, but that's
But
because we're here to learn, we're here to develop,
exactly.
and if everything went swimmingly all the time, what would we learn?
And just remember that every day we're alive, we've 100% dealt with everything that life's thrown at us so far. So
Yeah, very true.
we've got 100% track record of dealing with everything that's been dealt to us.
Very true.
So pushing that out into the future a little bit, chances are we'll get through everything else that life throws at us as well.
Yeah. And hopefully with a bit more self-belief as and I certainly would say that as I've grown older, my self-belief has improved incredibly. I didn't have a lot of self-belief or a lot of self-confidence as a child,
Yeah, me
but
neither.
as I've grown older, that's definitely improved considerably. But even so, I've had my moments, and that's okay because, as I've already said, and as I've been reminded of several times recently, I'm right where I need to be. Everything's just as it needs to be,
Yeah.
and everything is it's fine. It's good. So,
I've
anything else to add?
no, I've got a feeling we could have carried on, and this is a slightly longer episode than we would normally do anyway. So, no, I think that's a good place to pause, and maybe this is something we need to revisit.
Yeah, possibly in the future.
So,
Okay, so hopefully that's given people lots to think about. And something actually just briefly to bring in, we've talked about affirmations and afformations in the past, I believe.
mhm.
So if you are having problems with self-belief or self-confidence, then maybe think about doing some affirmations to help you to feel more confident, and to help you to shift your perception of yourself so that you have more self-belief, and use affirmations to kind of get your subconscious bringing answers forward to you to help you to have that to put the changes in place to have that self-belief and self-trust and in yourself. um, and if you want any help with that, then do please get in touch with myself or Jeremy.
Yep. Either of us can help with that if you need the support.
Yeah, indeed. Righty, so we'll leave it on that note. Probably a topic we'll come back to at some point in some way in the future, but for now, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.